Earthbound is an RPG that is, like others, near and dear to my heart, so I decided to go ahead and ruin that by making it into a challenge. Now the challenge I'm doing this time around is trying to beat Earthbound with only Ness. Now there's going to be a little bit more fluctuation on that whole only Ness thing, but I'll explain that when I jump into the rules. So simply put, we're trying to use only Ness as much as we possibly can. There are sections of the game where Ness doesn't show up, so we sort of have no choice but to use the characters like Jeff or Pooh that we have to use in those sections. So it's not really a solo run, it's more of a semi-solo run, but we're going to use Ness as much as humanly possible. So that means whenever we get a new party member or a new party member, basically one of our party members revives, we have to kill them off as quickly as possible. Now when I say revives, there are some portions of the game where certain characters have to be alive, or whenever you reach a sanctuary location, your party gets fully healed and revived, so you'd have to kill off your party again. And there'll be instances, like I'll explain later on, where something unavoidable happens and another party member does get some experience, but that doesn't really matter too much. The whole point of this challenge is to make sure Ness is the one that's dealing with the enemies. If Pooh, Jeff, or Paula get 1 or 2 damage here or there, it really doesn't make any difference to me. As long as Ness is the one that's doing most of the damage, that's what I care about. The only other thing is I'm not going to be abusing any glitches like the rock candy or magic truffle glitches, which are you can basically duplicate those 2 items infinitely if you use jars of deli sauce or sugar packets. If you use condiments instead of the truffle, there's a sort of glitch that makes it so it uses up the condiment and not the truffle or the rock candy, but I'm not going to be using either of those glitches. I think that's really it, so let's just jump into Earthbound. Now this is going to be a slightly longer video than last time, so I hope you guys like it. The game opens up with a loud crash, so we go outside to take a look at what it was, but there's a bunch of police officers blocking off the path. We get awoken later that night by our neighbor Pokey, who says that his little brother Pinky got lost. We climb up to where we were before and we go up to the meteorite where we find Pinky and we meet a new character, Buzz Buzz. Now Buzz Buzz is quite literally what you think. He is a fly. He's actually come from the future, and he tells us about the evil Gygas and how we're gonna have to be the one to stop his evil plans. Right as we leave, we run across our first boss. Well, it's not really a boss, it's more of a scripted battle. We run across Starman Jr. Now, we don't really do anything in this battle. Ness is pretty much just bashing the entire time, and the one that does the damage is Buzz Buzz, who has a psychic shield and very powerful PSI attacks. Buzz Buzz kills off Starman Jr., and we take Pokey and Pinky back to their parents' house, in which Pokey's mother thinks Buzz Buzz is just a common housefly, and smacks and kills Buzz Buzz. The all-powerful PSI user gets swatted to death. So Buzz Buzz leaves us with the Soundstone and tells us to go around the land, picking up little pieces of a melody that'll help us in our battle against the evil Gygas. We head on home, talk to our mother one last time, and then leave to start our adventure. Now, our first place of interest is Wanette, the town that we're in. We're more in the north of Wanette. It turns out that Wanette has been overrun by a gang of hooligans. These guys are the Shark Gang, so Shark members will be scattered all throughout town. None of them are really any challenge, except for maybe the roller skater guy and the pogo guy. After clearing out a bunch of Shark members, we get introduced to their boss, Frank, who is our first official boss fight. Frank is actually in 2 sections. First there's him by himself, in which he'll just use knife attacks and he doesn't do very much damage. But the more scary part is the Frankenstein Mark II, the robot that he has under his control. Frankenstein Mark II attacks every other turn essentially. He generates a burst of steam on one turn and then throws a punch on the other. It usually does about 15 to 16 points of damage. And what I did is I just made sure I had enough HP, using Life Up Alpha every now and then, and just kept bashing it until it died. That's pretty much what this game is going to turn into. You'll see, it's bashing simulator. The nice thing about the early game is it's a solo run anyway, so this is the easy part of the game. As a reward for beating Frank, we're given the keys to the shack, which are needed to go north to the first sanctuary zone. This is our first dungeon of the game, and the enemies that we encounter here are attack slugs, which are pretty easy to deal with, and then deadly mice. Deadly mice only deal 1 damage, but they have a very high gut stat. And what guts does in this game is it gives a higher chance for a critical hit. So these guys have really high guts, so that means they're a lot more likely to crit you. So they either end up doing 1 damage to me, or 14 damage. So they can be a little bit annoying to deal with. The other enemy here that's a little annoying are the black Antoids. They're the strongest enemy. They can be a little bit annoying. Once we make our way to the back of the cave, we get introduced to the first main boss of the game, the Titanic Ant. The Titanic Ant also has a couple of black Antoids with him. Now the Titanic Ant's gimmick is to use PSI Magnet Alpha a lot, which drains our PP, so essentially we're not able to use any real PP moves. I do, however, start off the fight with a PSI Vibing Alpha, which is what I named Rockin'. PSI Rockin' is Ness's main attack PSI, and if you don't know what PSI is essentially like magic in this game. You have an HP and a PP system, and the PP is what's used for PSI attacks. So PSI Vibing Alpha takes out both of the Antoids, and so my strategy now is to just bash away, and occasionally I'll use a hamburger to heal up, and Titanic Ant isn't too big of a problem. We reach the giant step and get our first melody recorded, and we're done with this area. Now our next location is Tucson. The reason we can't get to Tucson right now is because there's a police blockade, so we need to go down to this police station and talk with the police chief, Strong, to try and get it open. Now Strong tasks us with defeating all of his police officers, so you have to go through a gauntlet of 5 officers in order to open up the path. The last one chickens out, and instead you have to fight Captain Strong himself. Now, Captain Strong is very scary because he has a couple of moves like losing his temper and submission hold that do a lot of damage, like 40 plus. So just make sure that you're healing constantly while you just bash away. Unfortunately, Ness doesn't really have anything better to do besides bashing, as using PSI for anything other than healing is, in my opinion, not really worth it at this stage. Another thing to mention is this game has a system of rolling HP, which means even if you take lethal damage, you have a certain amount of time to heal up before that damage actually hits you. Now, early game, it's not as important because you don't have a lot of HP, but later in the game, it gets really important to sort of abuse the rolling HP system. Now, PP does also roll, but animations sort of take up the length of that anyway, so I won't worry about that. So the path has been cleared, and we make our way south, and I run into my mortal enemy for this playthrough, the mushrooms. Rambling evil mushrooms are enemies that can sprinkle spores on you to make you feel strange. It'll give you the mushroom status, which basically makes you miss every now and then, and makes your controls all wonky. It is not fun to deal with at all. After that, finally, we make our way to Tucson. We do a bit of shopping, get some better gear, we sleep, and we get a dream from this girl named Paula, who's asking us to rescue her. So we go in and investigate. We go to the Polestar preschool, which is where Paula's parents live. So we go and try and figure out where she's been. Her parents don't really help much, so we have to sort of look for information on Paula by ourselves. Our next best bet is Burgling Park, where we run into a mini-boss, Mr. Everdread. Now he is... I thought for some reason I was thinking he was difficult, but he was extremely easy. Just bash and heal if you're low. This is the part in the game where inventory space starts getting really bad. Now you have a very limited amount of inventory space. Each character can only carry up to 14 items, and that seems like a decent amount, but not when like 5 of them are items like inventory, like equipment and key items that you can't get rid of, like the ATM card, the Soundstone. So thankfully there's a system in the game called the Escargot Express, which lets us drop off items and pick them up later if we need to. They're just a delivery service. Anyway, Mr. Everdread tells us to check out Peaceful Rest Valley. Anyway, Mr. Everdread says that Paula went off to a secret hideout in the Peaceful Rest Valley, so that's where we head to next. But before we do that, we go ahead and introduce ourselves to Orange Kid and Apple Kid, 2 inventors of the area. We give them each a stipend of $200 just to help them with their research. Orange Kid doesn't really matter that much, but Apple Kid, you need to give them that $200 because you won't be able to progress otherwise. Now, if you thought those mushrooms were bad enough, in come the sprouts. The mobile sprouts are kind of like the Titanic Ant. They just suck PP from you. That's so bad. So with the mushrooms and the sprouts, this area is, God, it's annoying. But anyway, as we make our way through the cave on the east side of Tucson, we make our way into Peaceful Rest Valley. But as we go up, we see this odd-looking pencil statue blocking our path. As there's nothing for us to do, we head on back. We actually get a call from Apple Kid, who has given us a receiver phone, that he has some sort of invention to get rid of pencil statues, which sounds really convenient. So we pick up the pencil eraser, and we're able to get rid of that iron pencil statue and make our way through Peaceful Rest Valley. Peaceful Rest Valley is another semi-annoying zone. So there's a few enemies here. There's UFOs. There's a territorial oak, which explodes when you defeat it. So that's what the whole rolling HP comes in handy, because the faster you mash through the text options, the less HP that he will destroy, essentially. More of those sprouts are here. And there's also this little robot guy who likes to give you colds. Colds aren't the worst thing in the world, as you can heal them with PSI Healing Alpha, but that's 4 PP we don't need to use. Learning to conserve your PP is very important in this game, and especially in an area coming up. Ooh, yikes. Anyway, once we get through the Peaceful Rest Valley, we make our way into the Happy Village. Yeah, I know, it sounds bad. It sounds like a red flag. All of the people here have been corrupted by the power of blue. Everyone's happy in blue, and there's a bunch of these insane cultists scattered throughout the town, and they look suspiciously like a group of people that... yeah. I mean, you can see them right here. It's pretty obvious. I'm not gonna say anything, but yikes. As we're sort of going around the village, we learn about Mr. Carpenter, the leader of the cult. It's a cult. He's holed up in this big building in the middle of town where there's an insane amount of insane cultists. See what I did there? Once we make our way through the cultists, we meet Mr. Carpenter himself. However, we can't actually fight him yet, as he just zaps us with lightning. Now what we gotta do is there's a cave in the north of town that we have to go through, and that's actually where Paula is. Paula's locked up right now, but she does give us the Franklin badge. Now, the Franklin badge is a very, very, very important item that we are going to use and abuse. The Franklin badge just deflects lightning. It's broken. It really is. With the Franklin badge, we make our way back through Mr. Carpenter's house, and now we can actually fight him. And the fight against him's really easy, because he either only attacks or uses lightning, and we deflect lightning, so we can't really do anything. We defeat him, and it was our mistake, honestly, but we left the statue that was behind him there, and we'll learn more about what that statue is. We defeat Mr. Carpenter, and we're given the keys to the shack. So now we can go rescue Paula. We get Paula, and we also get a teddy bear, which we have to throw away, which is kind of depressing because the teddy bear is a damage soaker, essentially. Before we leave Peaceful Rest Valley, we actually go to the second sanctuary location, which is in Happy Village, Lilliput Steps. Now, our first objective when we're in the cave is to get Paula killed off as soon as possible. We don't want her gaining any experience if possible, and so that's pretty easy. And the rest of the game is going to be in this red sort of text. Making our way through the cave, we meet Mondomole, the sanctuary boss. Mondomole's strategy is to increase his own attack with offense up alpha, and he also has a shield that he uses that helps block physical damage. His attacks do a lot of damage, which is pretty scary. His sharp claw attacks can do upwards of 70 damage, and we don't have a ton of HP right now. So his moves can do about between 40 and 70 damage, which is pretty gross. So what I do here is I try and set up a shield for myself to decrease the damage I take a little bit and make sure I heal up as much as I can. I get really, really low on PP at the end, and I'm literally about one attack away from dying, but I managed to defeat him and we reached level 21. We learned that our next destination is at Threed, but we can't actually go that way yet because the tunnel is haunted by ghosts, and they'll block you out anytime you try and take the bus there. So instead, Paula and I go and have some good old-fashioned fun over at the Runaway 5 show. It turns out that their manager wants money to basically free the Runaway 5 because they're in debt to the theater. Thankfully, we had a wad of bills that Everdred gave us a little bit ago. So we give it to them, and then the Runaway 5 are our ticket. We give the wad of bills to the manager, and the Runaway 5 are free. And so as thanks, they give us a ride to Threed, and the ghosts in the tunnel are actually scared off by all of the happy music that our boys are playing. We make it to Threed, and Threed is a town that's also infested with enemies, but this time they're spooky enemies. Ooh. The entire town looks bleak and has basically been infested with zombies. We go around the town exploring a little. We run into a couple of zombies in the north who don't do anything and just stare into our soul. We see a suspicious figure outside of the hotel, this woman who looks like she's trying to beckon us in. We go in and the music turns all distorted. We follow her and we actually get kidnapped by a bunch of zombies. And now Paula reaches out and prays to the next party member to come rescue us. Introducing Jeff. This is the part of the game where we can't use Ness. So it's a fun one. Jeff hears our message and gets prepared to leave his dormitory in the north of Winters. As he moves south though, he runs into a shop, and this is where another challenge in the game exists. It's called the T-Rex challenge, or the T-Rex bat challenge. What this challenge is there is a T-Rex bat in the shop that costs essentially it's $700. Now the objective of this is to get the bat through all of the weak enemies around this area. You might think, wow, that makes it really, really annoying, considering each enemy gives between $3 and $6 per enemy, because some will drop cookies and bread rolls that sell for $3 and $6 respectively. So you'd have to be insane to do this, right? Well, I'm insane. So yeah, I actually go ahead and do the challenge. I honestly spend more time with Jeff than I have with any other character so far, which is kind of funny. I didn't record most of it because I'm just like, yeah, this is going to take me a while. But it took me about, I want to say about an hour and a half to grind all of that. The reason being is because the T-Rex bat is really good, and I want Ness to be as loaded as possible throughout this game just to make it a little bit easier for me going forward. So with the help of our buddy, the Bubble Monkey, we make our way through, get the bat, and go south. We run into the Tessie Watching Club, which Tessie is Nessie. And actually we're able to meet Tessie, and Tessie gives us a ride to the next area. Next up we go through Brick Road, which is a man-made dungeon by Brick Road himself. It's a really easy dungeon, and especially because I'm super over-leveled at this point. We get through there quickly, make our way south, and we actually run into the 4th Sanctuary location, funny enough. But we can't actually interact with it because we need Ness, so we skip that for now. We make our way into the lab in the south, which is Dr. Endonut's lab. Now it turns out Dr. Endonut is actually our father, or Jeff's father, who's been really, really bad with his son, neglecting him, stuff like that. Just sent him into a dormitory in the north. It's like, whatever. But anyway, we use his invention, the Skyrunner, to make our way to Threed, and we save Ness and get reunited with everyone. And as a reward for saving Ness, I kill off Jeff instantly. So now Jeff is dead, and we're able to progress through the rest of the game. Now, as we leave the tunnel that we were trapped in, our first objective is to defeat a boogeyman tent, or boogie tent. It's this sort of phantom tent in the south. Now this tent strategy is to use PSI flash a lot, and it basically makes us cry, which is annoying, but we can get rid of the crying status. It also spews out fly honey to make us stop moving, but with our newly equipped bat, he's easy work. With the help of Apple Kid's new invention, the zombie paper, we're able to round up all the zombies in the town and stick them, which sounds weird, I know. But those zombies that were in the north before, the ones that were blocking off our path before, are now gone. We can actually make our way through that path, and so far this is the most annoying area of the game. There are 2 main reasons for that. Those goddamn ghosts and those goddamn zombie dogs. The ghosts have an ability that they can possess you. Now what possession does is it gives you a little ghost that'll spin around constantly, and there's no way to get rid of it unless you go to a blue-haired healer and hit Purify. That's the only way to get rid of it in the entire game, which is stupid. It's like mushroomization. What the little ghost can do is he can reach out his little hand and freeze you for a turn, so you can't do anything for the entire turn. And it's pretty consistent. He'll do it like every other turn or every 3 turns. It gets really annoying. Besides that, he'll only do 1 damage to you. But I mean, he can smash you, but it's very low odds for doing that. The other annoying enemy is that dog, and the dog is very powerful, and he bites with poisonous fangs, so he'll poison you. So I have to deal with the ghosts and poison, and I die a few times trying to get through this area. Once I get through that area, I avoid as many enemies as I can in the new area, Grapefruit Falls, and I make my way to another area, Saturn Valley, the home of the Mr. Saturns. Mr. Saturns are creatures, I guess. They're weird little creatures with weird speech patterns, but they have a lot of nice items like Horn of Lives, more gear for my boy Ness. Basically just more convenient stuff. We're given a hint by one of the Mr. Saturns about a secret waterfall in the north of Grapefruit Falls and how to get in there. Now this is the most exciting part of the game. Our job is literally to stand under a waterfall for 3 minutes as a password to enter this building. That's literally what it is. It's weird, but it's kind of funny. This new area is known as Belch's Factory, and he is the mastermind behind all of this corruption going on in Threed. There are a couple of enemies here, but the most substantial one is the Foppy. And the Foppy is really cool because the Foppy is weak and gives a lot of experience. So I don't abuse them too much, but the experience boost is nice considering they give a solid amount of experience. They give like, if you kill 6 of them, they'll give you 8,000 experience, which by this part is pretty big number. Anyway, making our way through the factory, we see that a lot of the Mr. Saturns are being put to work making fly honey. Fly honey is the obsession that Master Belch has. Now, we were actually given a jar of fly honey earlier, and it is very important to use that jar of fly honey in the upcoming boss against Master Belch, because it makes his entire fight irrelevant. If you use the jar of fly honey on Master Belch, he will basically be engrossed in the fly honey in the entire fight and won't do anything to you, so you could just bash away at him without any repercussions. Now we have successfully freed Threed. But before we do that, we actually have another area to go to, another sanctuary. So the next sanctuary is the bane of my existence, and let's just say we won't really be tackling it now. Milky Well is a hell for us, because not only are there more evolved mushrooms, there are Ramboobs, I know, weird names also, which gives PSI shields to enemies, and more tough mobile sprouts. So not only am I getting poisoned, I'm getting my PP sucked. I'm gonna say that all video, aren't I? And we're getting poisoned. So it's just not worth me for going through this right now. Thankfully, the good thing about this game is you can leave the sanctuaries and come back and deal with them at a later point, which is what I do. I head back to Threed and see that it's been cleared up. Now that we've saved Threed, we can make our way into Fourside. As we take a bus to Fourside, we actually get stopped by traffic, which I feel that. But we're stuck in the desert, so we can just go around the traffic and go through the desert. Thankfully though, if you stick to the south sort of part of the desert, like right above where you have to go, you can get to Fourside pretty easily. Before you get to Fourside though, there's a miner's shack, and there's this man named Gerardo Montague, I believe is his name, who you want to give some food to. That'll be very important for later on, trust me. Anyway, we make our way into Fourside, which is a very, very big city. It's the sort of metropolis of the game. Now, as we were leaving Tucson earlier in the game, the Runaway 5 were saying that they were going to go to Fourside, so we go over to the Topola Theater to talk to them. Buy a ticket to the show, see the show, and figure out that once again they're in debt. We have to get them $1 million this time. The what if bills last time was 10K and this is $1 million, so kind of a bit different. But with that in mind, our next objective is to go back to the desert, and we actually find out that that guy from before that we gave the sandwich to has opened up a cave. Now our job is to go through that cave and clear it out of any enemies that may be there, so Gerardo can successfully dig up anything and he'll give whatever he digs up to us. Now the Dusty Dunes gold mine, as it's called, is, oh god, this is another really, really, really obnoxious dungeon. There's a few reasons for that. One, there's 5 bosses. They're called the Guardian Diggers, and their sort of concept is they are all the 3rd most powerful of the group. Everyone claims that they're the 3rd strongest, and you'll see number 3 behind every single one of them. There's no differences in any of the fights, but this area is very confusing. There's a lot of enemies, and those enemies are really annoying. Let's go through why they're annoying. First, we have the Coil Snake. He'll poison you. We have the Mad Duck, who gets rid of your PP. Then we have the Gigantic Ant, similar to the Titanic Ant, uses PSI Magna Alpha and gets rid of your PP. So we have to go through this dungeon a lot with a very low amount of PP. After running back and forth to heal between like each Guardian Digger fight, we eventually make our way through there, and Jesus, was that annoying. Their weaknesses are PSI freeze, and we can't use freeze because we don't have access to that. All of them have physical shields too. So my strategy going through each of the boss fights was, he has a shield, let me just set up my own shield. And so we just essentially traded shields, we attacked each other until we whittled each other down. That's why I had to heal between each fight, because it was just so close each time. After we clear out the cave of any threats, we make our way back to Fourside, but before we do, Gerardo's brother gives us a diamond as payment, and so we go back to the Topola Theater and give that diamond to the manager, and guess who's free to go once again? So the Runaway Five give us one last show before they leave, and now it's up to us to continue on the adventure. There's a department store in town that was actually closed before now, so now that it's open, we're going to take a look at it. This is actually where you need to go for the next part of the game. So the thing I didn't realize is Paula has to be alive in this event. Like, I know what happens to Paula, but I didn't realize she actually had to be alive. It makes sense, but we heal her and we take her back into the department store. And what happens is the lights go out and she gets kidnapped. We make our way to the top. The sound over the intercom is basically telling us, hey, go to the top floor. If you want Paula back, come up here. But Paula's not here. We actually have to fight against the department store Mook. The department store Mook has a lot of PSI freezes and fires alpha, so it's not too bad. He does hit us for mortal damage, but we take care of him. Thank God for scrolling HP. Scrolling HP is starting to make an effect now, as our HP is around 300. After defeating the Mook, we leave and sort of explore town. Not really sure what to do. I mean, I know what to do, but they don't give us a clear sort of explanation about what to do next. But our next objective is the cafe in the left side of town. We need to go in there, sort of just talk around a little bit. And then you'll eventually hear a thud and you rush outside, and Everdred has actually been attacked. What happened was Everdred he didn't steal. He sold the statue that Mr. Carpenter had behind him, which is now known as the Mani Mani statue, to the leader of the city, who has an Italian name which I cannot pronounce for the life of me. Montoli, I think, or something. So now it's essentially our objective to deal with Montoli now that we know that he has the statue, and we learned that the statue was actually the source of why Mr. Carpenter was being evil. The other thing I did not mention beforehand, actually, and this is kind of an important plot point, was back in Happy Happy Village, Pokey was there as the assistant to Mr. Carpenter, and yet again here he is now the assistant to Mr. Montoli. After healing up Everdred, he asks us to check the back of the counter in the cafe, and what it does is it inverts the world, and we are now in this place called Moonside, which is like Fourside but drastically different. Not only are there enemies here, everything is backwards here, so yes means no and no means yes. So remember, when you're answering dialogue questions, you want to answer no if you want yes, and vice versa. There are guys around that teleport you throughout Moonside, and there's a lot of enemies. None of these enemies are really that troubling, but there's just a lot of enemies to deal with, so it can get rather tedious. In order to reach Mr. Montoli's office, which is where we need to go, we need to bring someone with a gold tooth along with us. And so after teleporting enough, we get teleported into this building where this invisible gold tooth man, who I honestly have no idea who it is. If anyone knows, let me know, that'd be really cool. But with him in hand, the invisible gold tooth man and the man who's blocking our path move out of the way. We're able to move onto the center, into the Montoli building, where the Mani Mani statue is waiting for us. This is where we have another boss fight against said statue. The Mani Mani statue's strategy is to use paralysis, which will numb you, which means you can't do physical attacks, and to also emit a pale green light, which is basically, it nullifies any stat gains or losses from PSI attacks. He also has PSI Magnet, so what a shocker. But anyway, after we get paralyzed, we can't do anything about it. So we just spam PSI Vibe Beta. And after spamming that, we're able to take out the Mani Mani statue, and we just straight up destroy it. After we destroy it, Moonside no longer exists, and we go back to Fourside. Apple Kid gives us a call about a trout-flavored yogurt machine that he has invented. And we also run into this monkey who tells us that the man named Talarama wants to talk to us, who's over in the Dusty Dunes desert from before. So heading back into this desert, we run into the monkey caves, which are in the front sort of portion of the desert. The monkey caves are pretty cool. You need to make sure in order to access this place that you bring a skip sandwich and a picnic lunch along. And so the gimmick of this place is you need to give each monkey that's blocking your path an item that'll appear somewhere in the dungeon. So there's a specific guide online that you can use, or you can just sort of freeball it and hope that you get it right. But I freeball it because I sort of remembered everything, and thank God I got almost every item that I needed. think I only missed like one broken thing for Jeff, but it doesn't even matter for me. There's not really any enemies to deal with in this cave, so we make our way to the end and run into the Talarama, who gives us the ability to teleport. Well, his monkey friend does. And now we have Teleport Alpha, which is kind of annoying to work, but what you have to do is you have to walk into a long stretch of land before you can actually teleport anywhere. And if you don't, if you're not far enough, you're gonna run into a wall and it'll stop the teleportation. So you need to find a long stretch of land to use. Anyway, now that we have access to teleportation, our first thing that we do is we jump over to Winter's real quick, just because I know that the shop there has some really nice items. So we pick up a few remaining items that we need from there. And then we actually head back to Saturn Valley next, because I want to give the dungeon another shot. It completely fails, and I just give up again. And trust me, I tried for like 30 minutes to get through it, but I just was like, no, I'm not having any of this. So next we actually got to go back to Forside, and now we can go into the Montoli building, because we've given the maid the trout yogurt from before. She'll let us into the top floor, where the big man himself is at. The only enemies in this area are bunch of security robots, and then a nice little clumsy robot at the end. Now, a clumsy robot isn't as big of a threat as you think, especially with me and my insanely strong Ness. You just gotta bash him in the face a few times. He says that he'll eat a bologna sandwich that'll heal his HP to full, but don't listen to that. That's actually just a lie. It doesn't do anything to his HP. It just, for some reason, makes it seem like it does. So you just gotta keep bashing, heal up when you need to, and then eventually, halfway through the fight, the runaway 5 will rush into the building, and they want to repay you for all the help that you've given. So what they do is they rush in, they distract the robot, and actually turn him off. There's a little power switch on the back, which we thought of earlier, but we just turned the robot off. Now that the last line of defense has been defeated, we can make our way into Montoli's office. Montoli, now that the statue has been destroyed, regrets everything that he's done. He's been awoken to the sort of sins he's committed, and he tells us that Gygas didn't want us to go to Summers, so we obviously want to go to Summers. Summers is our next location. So he gives us a helicopter to reach there, but before we can leave, Pokey actually comes in and steals the helicopter from us. Bastard. And with the helicopter stolen, we have to figure out some other way to get to Summers. But we'll figure out some other way to get to Summers on the next part. I'm actually going to split this up into 2, because oh boy is this a longer game than I thought. Now, I want to give my initial impressions of the first half of the game. Really, this first half is my favorite half, because it's just not too bad. I mean, sure, there were some problems like we had in the mines, and with the sprouts and the mushrooms, but nothing too bad. Honestly, the first part of the game is a Ness solo run anyway. And once we get Paula, we can just kill her off, and it's really not that bad. Of course, enemies gave me more problems than they should have, but after grinding out for the T-Rex bat, like, I'm glad I did. I'm really happy that I did that, to be honest. Because if I didn't grind out that bat, I probably would have been more screwed than I was, and I was pretty screwed. But yeah, none of the fights have really been too challenging, so far this solo run is pretty easy, but that'll all change in the next part. And until then, as always, my name has been Meteor Kaiser, and I'll see you all in the next one. And until then, as always, peace.